There are two scriptures to read this morning. The first is from Paul's letter to the Philippians, chapter 4, verses 8 and 9. Finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there is any excellence and if there is anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Keep on doing the things that you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. Then these words from the Gospel according to Matthew, chapter 12, verses 43 to 45. When the unclean spirit has gone out of a man, he passes through waterless places seeking rest, but he finds none. Then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it empty, swept, and put in order. Then he goes and brings with him 7 other spirits more evil than himself, and they enter and dwell there, and the last state of that man becomes worse than the first. So shall it be also with this evil generation. Today's sermon title is Healthy, Holy Habits. I don't know where that precise set of words came from. I presume you've heard it somewhere before. I'd like to say they were mine, but I can't. I've Googled it. I have checked out Amazon.com and eBay, and I can't pin them to any author. But try as I might, I can't identify the source anyway. So whoever came up with them, I do believe deserves some credit. But, what you doing? Meanwhile, September seems like a good time to preach on healthy, holy habits. September is a time of new beginnings, don't you know? The summer is sort of a Sabbath in our lives, so the fall becomes the pragmatic new year. Frankly, I think it's much more realistic than January 1. As society lurches into motion again, it becomes a time for exercising self-control in new ways, for getting our own wildernesses, our own temptations, our own spiritual chaos into some form of meaningful perspective. They're the stuff of which character, self-esteem, productivity, confidence, and trust are made. They're the stuff of beingness that ensures a life that's worth extending forever. I mean, a lot of Christian folk have spent a lot of time about life going on forever and ever, and yet can't stand the life they're living right now. What's that about? Does that mean they're going to be as bored if there is a life extending forever? The difference between now and then is that this one at least will come to an end. But if we can't figure out how we're going to live and do something with it now, what are we going to do with it if it doesn't end? That sounds like some kind of hell to me. Of course, habits get a bad rap. Even as a Baptist, I remember learning to enjoy spontaneity because, it's supposed to come from the heart. It's supposed to come from within and find new ways of expression, and rituals are dead. That's what I was taught. And then I remembered good old Deacon George Sohn. Wednesday night prayer service. I could say his spontaneous prayer word for word because I heard it every week. And it was just as lifeless every week. I think he would have done well for his spontaneity if he sat down with a pen and pencil and actually tried to think of something fresh and new to say about life. So it's a troubling thing. Habits, we don't necessarily take to the idea too quickly. And of course, we often talk about destructive habits, habits that we're trying to kick, habits that we think others ought to kick, especially habits that others ought to kick. I'm reminded of a wedding rehearsal I had years ago. It was Friday evening, about 45 minutes before the wedding party was due to arrive at the church. The back entrance to the church, that was the main entrance because it was next to the parking lot. The back entrance had this recessed stairwell, and as I approached it, I came upon 3 people who were having their own little party. Their beer was all tidied up in brown paper bags, and long before dusk, they were already 3 sheets to the wind, drunk as a skunk. As I approached, I said to them, "Hey, I hate to spoil your fun," and I really did. Hate to spoil your fun, but I've got a wedding party coming in here in just a little while, so I have to ask you to move. They were very understanding, and they picked up their gear and they moved along. The next afternoon was the wedding. So again, I come back to the church about an hour and a half before the wedding, and there they were again. Much earlier in the day, but same station, same menu. And again I said, "So sorry, but the wedding party is going to be arriving very shortly along with all their guests, so I have to ask you to move again. I'm sorry." To which I added, "But you know what? You seem to be hitting it awfully early. I wonder if you might have a problem. Instead of moving on to some other spot, maybe it would be better if I took you over to Detox." Detox was a drug and alcohol facility open to anyone needing to dry out or sober up. It was also a gateway to a variety of rehab programs. But one of them spoke up to say, "Oh no, Reverend, we don't want to go to Detox. They got a bad attitude about drinking." That's the kind of habit we're used to thinking about. An addiction, a pattern of destructive behavior, a pattern that possesses us in spite of our druthers or best efforts, something to kick. But that's not the whole story about habits. The fact is, we need habits to keep us honest, to keep us healthy, to keep us sane, to keep us productive, to keep us being who we really, really want to be. Habits are the answer to the statement, "I really want to be doing such and such, but when the time comes around, I just don't feel like it." But you know what? Feeling like it does not hold down a job. Feeling like it is not what maintains an exercise program. Feeling like it is not what gets the laundry done. Feeling like it is not what sustains a relationship. Feeling like it is not what gets us to church. Feeling like it is not what gets us a diploma or a degree. Feeling like it is not what provides good nutrition. Feeling like it is not what facilitates forgiveness. Feeling like it is not the foundation of a vital prayer life. Feeling like it is not what gets us to the voting booth on election day. Feeling like it is not what gets us either out of bed or into bed at night. Feeling like it is not what gets us off the dime in regard to any of the things that we claim we want desperately in our lives, at least not on a long-term basis, which is really what matters if it's going to make any significant difference. When we feel like it, we're usually not in a position to act on it. No matter how moving the mountaintop experience might be, or the profound sense of resolve that is stimulated by those wonderful gifts of guilt, or possibly inspiration, or ambition, feeling like it is not the engine that changes our lives. The locomotive for the train we want to board is energized not by feeling, but by decision. And decision, in order to be effective, must have the sustaining power of what we know to be healthy, holy habits. Mind you, this is being preached by somebody who loves spontaneity. I love the spice of deciding to do something on the spur of the moment. My wife could give an amen at this point. I don't like being predictable every moment of the day. I want there to be some surprises. But you know what? I also remember the profound satisfaction that came from a visit to a psychologist, one of the several times that Terry and I went to a career assessment program up in Boston. I think we've been 5 or 6 times. We did this first in 1972 when I was fresh out of seminary. In 1979, we went back, and lo and behold, the same psychologist was there. I had a fun time as he led me again through the Rorschach test. I just love those provocative ink blots. I see so many fun and sexy things in them. And when it was completed, he paused for a few moments and then said, "You know what? Your responses, when compared with 7 years ago, are 85% the same verbatim as they were then. Holy cow. Marvin Marsh, who prides himself on being unpredictable, spontaneous, creative to the point of being obnoxious, and here this brazen psychologist is telling me, as creative and as spontaneous as you think you are, you're 85% consistent and dependable. Well, hot damn. For a moment, it was deflating, and then I smiled. Perhaps there is something of substance to my psyche and character. Perhaps there is something upon which others can depend. Maybe there is something upon which I myself can depend. And that's not all bad. Recently, I had a conversation with someone who awakens every day in a household where she says of another family member, I'm never quite sure which person is going to come out of the bedroom door. Healthy, holy habits. Healthy, holy habits reflect our decisions about who we are, and they do make a healthy, holy difference. Jobs are held by people who know they're going to work, not by people who get up and decide whether or not they feel like it. Marriages are maintained by people who have decided to live together for better, for worse. That's what the traditional vow says, for better, for worse. And there's a whole lot of better and there's a whole lot of worse. But not by those who get up and decide whether or not they feel like it that day. Churches are maintained and have vital spiritual resources by those who have committed themselves to its ministry and mission, not by those who get up and decide whether or not they feel like it. Exercise programs, diets, education plans, and all sorts of personal and social ambitions thrive in the lives of those who commit themselves to their need and purpose and enshrine their intent in healthy, holy habits, not by those who get up and decide whether or not they feel like it. The gospel lesson is a story told by Jesus of a man who is somehow deserted by an unclean spirit. Now, the spirit wandered around looking for a new home without satisfaction after going out. Finally, it decided to go back to its familiar place, which it found empty, clean, and well swept. How about that? So it recruited 7 more unclean spirits, worse even than the original one, to move back into the man's life, which was now more miserable than ever before. Now, let's not argue about what an unclean spirit might be. It could have been an addiction. It could have been some sort of occult spiritual possession. It could have been a consuming grief. It could have been a retirement. It could have been any number of things which get in the way of our being the one whom God has created us to be. But the tragedy of the story is that the unclean spirit was absent and the man cleaned up his life, but then he left it empty. He brought in nothing which was constructive and fulfilling. And not long after, what happened was that old uncleanness returned along with 7 more of its ilk to occupy the space where previously there had been but one. It is clear that Jesus was not talking about anyone's house, but rather about the temple of our daily lives. The vacuum is more destructive in the long run than the original demon, don't you know? One addiction, if not replaced by a healthy, holy habit, is likely to be replaced by a bunch more addictions. One grief, if not replaced by a healthy, holy habit, is like to be replaced by multiple griefs that just won't quit. One annoying habit, when addressed seriously, is apt to be replaced by even more equally annoying habits, if not replaced by chosen habits that bring peace and well-being to one's life. That's how it is that Paul urged young disciples like this. He said, finally, beloved, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is just, whatever is pure, whatever is pleasing, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence and if there's anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Think justice, think honor, think purity. Keep on doing the things that you've learned and received and heard and seen in me, and the God of peace will be with you. In other words, create healthy, holy habits made of truth, honor, justice, purity, real satisfaction, that which is held in esteem, that which is excellent, and that which is worthy of praise. Don't just aspire to them, but create an infrastructure of healthy, holy habits from them, and the God of peace will be with you. Now, let me get practical and give you a couple of examples. First one, I love to swim. Didn't learn until I was 36 years old. Maybe that's why I love to do it. because it's probably the most significant personal achievement I have as an adult. It's my primary form of exercise, and every time I do it, I feel energized, relaxed, motivated, virtuous. But you know what? I hardly ever feel like going swimming. Once in a while, yeah. But on a regular basis, it's going to make a difference. To get in the swim, I have to put it on my schedule. Yeah. Put it in my calendar. I have to make a decision that I'm going to go swimming on a regular basis, and it's a rare time that I don't feel glad that I did it, even though my trip to the pool is filled with the thoughts of a dozen other things that I either need to be doing or that I feel more like doing. Number two, believe it or not, I do love the church. There are many days, however, Sunday included, I don't feel like it. I really don't. Not even when I was a regular pastor, you know? One of the luxuries of retirement is that occasionally I can get up and think, nah, not today. But you don't want to do that too often, because then that becomes the habit. Especially these things in the morning. I mean, I'm not a morning person. I've long envied church fellowships that have their primary services in the evening. I've always liked evening services better than the morning services. The light is better, the mood is better, the busyness of the day is gone. I can actually be there. Meanwhile, I have confessed multiple times, even as a pastor, that I'm glad I came to church on a day that I didn't feel like it. Yeah. Halfway through the service that I'm conducting, something happens. I think, wow, if I hadn't come, that wouldn't have happened. Something in the mix. It might have been a single conversation, a musical piece, the way the sun came through the window. Just a thought that wandered through my mind on a random basis, given the environment I was in. Maybe even one of my own lines. Yes, every once in a while, a phrase or a sentence that comes out of my own mouth boomerangs and makes me whole. This is true in my days as a pastor. This is true in my days as a bureaucrat when all I had to do was sit in a pew. And it's true in my retirement. I've learned, just like in my swimming, that showing up is more important than feeling like showing up will ever be. Am I making any sense? Okay. Then it's time for some decisions. It's New Year's. It's September. Kids are going back to school, various ways. We're even talking about some people going back to offices, haven't been there in a couple of years. Things are new. Things are starting up. But you have to decide for yourself, just like Jesus. You know, Jesus walked this lonesome valley. He had to walk it by himself. Oh, nobody else could walk it for him. He had to walk it for himself, which is to say, if you want worship to work for you, it won't happen if it's an ongoing option. You need to haul your tail out of bed and get here expecting to be surprised, both by what you receive and by what you have to give. If you want your prayer life, your Bible study, your own personal discipleship to work for you, it won't happen if you consider it to be a daily or weekly option. You got to forge some habits of which you can depend, expecting to be surprised in the process. Much like regular watering and weeding make your garden grow. You know, if the plants on our patio depended upon my feeling like watering them, I could dump the dirt now. So, if we want our relationships to thrive, then we have to give our magical thinking, expecting everyone else to meet our own needs, the boot. We have to consider what healthy, holy habits are needed in the framework of these relationships, and we have to make good on those decisions, and so do our partners, and we might want to work those out with our partners so they actually do make some sense. Aristotle, an old-timer, is quoted as saying, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, therefore, is not an act, but a habit." Do you hear that? We are not defined by what we do once in a while, like showing up on Easter. We are not defined by our favorite discussions. We are defined, we are nurtured, we are known, we are sustained by what we do repeatedly. Our whims and our mountaintop experiences say very, very little about us, no matter how much we might like to talk or even brag about them. But the habits which we craft and keep from them say volumes. Healthy, holy habits. A footnote. Yes, there are times we must adjust our habits, even take vacations from them. Times of crisis, times of special concern, especially when we're called upon to be caregivers for others. But here's the deal. This is also the time we slip away from what we ourselves need, and it's not always to get our act back together when it's time to do so. A lot of us are having that problem right now as things are moving a little bit differently after this pandemic. For one, I have enjoyed being home more than I ever have in my whole life. I never knew I could be such a homebody, but I don't want to be a complete homebody for the rest of my life. Thank you very much. Healthy, holy habits are a portion of salvation, which can be claimed only by our decision to do so. So, inertia is real. It's hard to overcome it, but I commend to you and to me our need for healthy, holy habits. A new season approaches. It's a wonderful opportunity to get our lives together and moving in the direction we say we want. Amen.